Well, I'm Sue King Marschaulk, the widow of Captain Paul Marschaulk, who flew the A-26 in Vietnam in 1969. I was born in California to Texas parents. My dad came home from the war on a troop carrier. He was Army Air Corps. And Mother met him in San Francisco, and they never went back to Texas. I had a great childhood. Graduated from the University of California at Berkeley in 1967 during the fun times, and married my childhood sweetheart. He was a helicopter pilot and was shot down and killed on February 8th, 1968 in Vietnam. Killed his whole crew. So 7 weeks short of 21, I was a widow. And the Army, we did not get the Army's permission to marry. He was between flight schools. So the Army did not know we were married. Neither did our parents or anyone else. Life went on, and 4 years later I married, and we have a son. And years later I was widowed again, and 9 years later was when I met Paul. During my time after my second husband died, and my son was grown, he was 21. So I worked, I was the regulatory compliance officer and also did the legal documentation for the commercial real estate division of Wells Fargo Bank. And it was a great job, I loved it. It was great working for Wells in those days. But I had to do something with my time. I've always said that being alone is a life situation, but being lonely is a choice. So I went out, and about that time, one of my neighbors was a retired Navy captain. He was living in San Diego, and he and some friends were working on getting the USS Midway as an aircraft carrier museum to be brought down to San Diego. And he wrote me in because of my regulatory compliance knowledge. There were so many things. It was the first floating aircraft carrier museum. And during all this, my parents, when I was young, taught us that not everyone has money to donate to various things, but everybody has at least a couple of hours. So we were taught to give back to our communities. And I always enjoyed being the woman behind the curtain. There are always a lot of people out there who want to be in the lights, and more power to them. I had more fun because I could get away with more stuff back behind the curtain. And I also, at that time, ran into some of those naval captains that I was working on that committee with, who had earned the Distinguished Flying Cross during wartime. And they were in the process of forming the Distinguished Flying Cross Society. And I was in the ground floor of that, again behind the curtain, trying to find records, getting paperwork done. And so between the Midway and that and working, I also got roped into arranging for parade cars to carry dignitaries because I belonged to the Corvette Club. So I got to know a lot of people in the veterans organizations in San Diego. And the Irish Congress of Southern California puts on the largest St. Patrick's Day parade west of the Mississippi. So I worked on that for quite a while, and in 2000, I was totally shocked and surprised to have been named the San Diego Woman of the Year. That was quite a year. I had 9 formal events, and I was widowed at the time, and I had a handler. And she kept saying, well, who is your escort? And I said, I don't have one. And her name was Mona. She would get frustrated with me. And Mona said, well, you need to have an escort. And I just said, Mona, if this came with an escort, then you better find one. I'm not digging one of my friends up, out of the, but it was a wonderful year. It was a year of being able to talk to other people about volunteering for things in their community. And it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And then the next year, in early 2001, the Distinguished Flying Cross Society made me the first honorary national member of their society. Those are my two greatest honors that I've received over the years. Wonderful group to work with. I think working on the Midway Project brought me into people that were very tolerant of being not only a female, but also the only civilian on some of those committees. I worked on a committee that the acquisition, aircraft acquisition, ship acquisition. There were 6 captains, an admiral, and myself. The very first meeting we had, it was, of course, at the Admiral's Club, table for 8, 3 captains on one side, and I knew those 3. I'd known one of them had been my neighbor for years, and he was sitting next to me on my left. And then 3 captains I had not yet met, Admiral at the other end. And so the Admiral had said we were going to have lunch first, and then we'd have our meeting to get acquainted. And Walt, Captain Walt, next to me, they served us soup, and he said something, I don't remember what. I don't remember what my comment was back, but the Admiral heard it. And the Admiral just goes, well, somebody has a smart mouth. And it just set me off, and I thought, I better establish myself right here, right now. So I took my spoon, I dipped it in Walt's soup, dipped it in my soup, put my spoon down. You could have heard a pin drop. Leaned forward and I said, Admiral, the men were served smart mouth soup. I was served sassy mouth soup, and you just better get used to it. Well, the 3 who knew me, they're dying. And these 3 over here are going, And the Admiral looked at me for just a half a second, and he just sat back and roared, and he said, okay, Sassy Sue, you'll do. And he called me that till the day he died. And I had a wonderful time with that group. I got into that just with that group just before my dad died. And it was like having 7 favorite uncles. So it was a great group to work with, and I enjoyed my time. Worked aircraft restoration. They didn't restore them anywhere near what this group does to airplanes, but they did them for display. And I was able to learn, most of the men were World War II, some Vietnam veterans, and a couple of active duty who were coming through. We had a hangar at North Island Naval Air Station. But they took me under their wing and taught me things. And if they were irritated that I was there, they never showed it, never. They were always just wonderful to me. And I learned, like how to cloth cover wings and just all kinds of great things. And Captain Moe, the aircraft acquisition, would take me over to Davis-Monthan when they were going to get parts and look for things. And he would give me a list of smalls. And he would say, you go out and find those. So they would be dickering for like a wing or something, And I'd come back with a little radio or whatever he'd given me the list of in my little box. And I'd say to the guy at DM, and I'd say, can I have these? These are really cool. And the guy goes, oh yeah, honey, you go ahead and take that. So Walt would send me, oh, it's my chair, I'm sorry.
I was told, but he's standing up.
No, I'm standing up.
No, I'm sorry. I'm
I'm
shifting in my chair. So I would get away with a lot of, altimeters, all kinds of stuff. So, and Walt would give me the list with the serial numbers on them as to exactly, so I didn't pull, if they were looking for one for an F9 or something, I wouldn't pull something that belonged to a different aircraft. So, and I've always been a junkyard junkie. We used to restore cars. That's how my brother and I put ourselves through college. Yeah. I was, bless my mother's heart, I had 12 years of ballet. Mom tried, but I was always out there with Dad, you know, and learning what wrench was what. And my second car was a Rambler, 1960 Rambler American convertible. And I kept blowing the transmission out of it. And going up not Berlin. Anyway, the real steep avenue in Berkeley. Okay.
Okay.
So I blew the transmission out of that car 3 times when I was at Cal Berkeley going up Marin Avenue, real steep hill. And I changed it each time because I helped change that little Borg Warner, about this big. And finally, it was discovered by the man, my dad's best friend, who ended up with that car because I got so frustrated with it, that it wasn't the transmission, the drive shaft was out of round. So, but I've always been mechanically inclined. I got that from my dad. And I met Paul Marschaulk around 2000. And my rule number 1 with working with any organization, because most of the time, many of the ones I was with were mostly men. And my rule was always, I always treated everyone as though they were married. I wasn't a flirt, didn't do any of that. You know, I was there to do my job and work. And and Paul was married. I didn't really even think much of it. He was one of the guys. And I was in Illinois Thanksgiving when his wife died. I did not know she died until about 6 months later. And I found out, you know, later. We both belonged to the Distinguished Flying Cross Society and the Confederate Air Force. And we were at the hangar one day, and I had noticed Paul had been very quiet, which is unusual for him. He was a very personable person. And I asked one of the guys, I said, you know, is there something wrong with Paul? And he said, well, his wife died last year. And I was very surprised. So later on that day, we were talking, and he started talking about his wife and how he missed her. And as you would with somebody, I just gave him a little hug. And it was like the world stopped. I was shocked. I felt, for the first time in my adult life, I felt that I was home. And it really startled me. I don't know whether we hugged for 5 seconds, 5 minutes in this hangar full of people. I have no idea. But I finally realized, and I went home, and one of my dear friends went over to her house because I was very shaken by what had happened. I had never felt that way. And we were talking about it, and her husband was in another room. And I remember Ed coming and standing in the door, and he said, did it ever occur to you that he felt the same way? And that made me really think, but I really had to, I was trying to decide what I was going to say to him to apologize. Because when I was widowed, the flakes came out of the woodwork, you know. So I didn't want to be disrespectful. So I was thinking about it, and 3 days later he called me and asked me to go to lunch. And by the time lunch was over, we were planning our wedding. We both knew we talked about it. And I just wanted I didn't really want to get married. Getting married was not in my 5 years to retirement plan. And Paul just insisted, that if we were going to be together, that, we had to be married. I said, if we have to have a wedding, then let's do a fly-in, drive-in wedding at the airport. He starts laughing, and I said, I am totally serious. You guys all come flying in. I'll come in with a caravan of Corvettes. We'll do it at the San Diego Aerospace Museum Restoration Hangar. We'll have a blast, and that's exactly what we did. It was so much fun. It was my first wedding, quote unquote. So we had a ball.
saw a picture you posted of your wedding kiss, you and that big
Yeah.
sunbonnet
Yeah.
hat. That was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. We had so much fun. And if we'd still lived there the year later, we would have had a party there. And I remember one of my sister-in-laws kept looking around going, only Sue would do this. Only Sue would do this. There was a Corvette, the 45th anniversary, I think, Corvettes matched my dress, same color as my dress, that deep burgundy wine color. And so there was one parked in my parking garage not far from me. And his license plate was 1 to fly. And in bank buildings, you always have tons of bankers and attorneys. So I left my business card on his car and said, your car's awesome. This is the color we're using in my wedding. And if you want to carry the flower girl, please call me. So he called me, and he was in the wedding party, and he carried my granddaughter. And he had more fun. He brought his wife and his young son. His son was about 7. They had a blast. He said his son talked about airplanes. We had 26 airplanes and a helicopter, 40 Corvettes, and 230 guests. And he said his son talked about helicopters and airplanes and cars and the whole time. But just Paul, you talk about soulmates, but until you meet one, and he was a huge blessing in my life. 10 months later, I retired early. We came back to Tennessee to buy a house. We decided to get out of California. And we each had a house we sold. And we decided when we got married to keep our estates separate. Because when you get married in your 60s, 50s and 60s, and you have children and you've got all this going on, make trusts, put everything in a trust and keep them separate. We had a checking account that we just paid the bills with, groceries and stuff. So I bought the house, and Paul decided he wanted a plane. Well, every pilot that's been flying for 50 years should have an airplane. So we started looking around, and he was looking at, Cessnas and things of that nature. But we'd be at an airport somewhere, and he'd go, look at that Stearman, So finally I said, Paul, buy a Stearman. And he said, they're so expensive. I've been a banker for 37 years. I said, Paul, it's a flying certificate of deposit. It's an investment, just like real estate or anything else. It's not going to lose value. We will insure it to the hilt. If for some reason something happens to it, we'll get the money back. It'll go back in the bank. We had that airplane for 6.5 years. We flew all over the place. He'd go, hey, weather looks really nice. Let's go to Timbuktu today. And off we would go.
What model Stearman did you buy?
We had a 1940 Stearman. It was red, had a white starburst. We bought it in Colorado Springs. It was in Colorado Springs when we bought it, and flew it back across the country. And on those flights, you go into these little regional airports, and sometimes you'd land on a grass field in some of these places. And with a Stearman, everybody, they're, hey, that's a Stearman, and they'll come out. And for Paul, you could see his love for his airplane, because he was, like you said, when he got in. And we had a ball. We had a blast with it. It was so much fun. I had never flown a taildragger. Everything had always been tricycle gear. And I remember the first time, I'm in the front seat. Got the big, huge Pratt & Whitney 985 in front of me, can't see a thing. Wing here. So it's kind of like, to see the ground. So I had fun in the air, So coming into land, it's a long runway where we were. I got probably down to maybe 2 or 3 feet off the ground, but I couldn't quite, and I didn't want to just slam that thing into the ground. So I'm trying to, braille it down. Paul gets on, he thought the intercom, but it was the radio. And he goes, "It's not a blank blank helicopter. Land it." Well, that went all over the airport, everybody in the air. And of course, you know, the whole airport can see that, you know, this steerman's going down. So I finally got it on the ground okay, but it was, so my nickname at that airport became Whirly, which is a little better than Squirrely, but not much. So, but we had a ball. We had a great time. We had a wonderful time with that airplane. So all in all, I've had a very good life. I've outlived 3 husbands.
You have the one child?
I have the one child. He's awesome. Of course, not that I'm prejudiced. He's a registered nurse. He was doing hospice for a while and then decided to go back and get his nurse practitioner license and degree. So he went back into the ICU. So he works Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night 12-hour shifts that gives him the week for his classes. And clinicals are when you go in and work with another nurse practitioner. So he's supposed to finish up, this is his last year. It's a 2-year course. So
how many Corvettes did you have?
over the years, 5. My first one was in 1969. It was silver, convertible. It was my first. Lost it in a wildfire. I lost everything but the 56 International Harvester, the horse trailer, the horses, the donkey, the cats and the dogs, and the clothes on my back to the ground in a California wildfire. But there's insurance. So the next one was a 71 red convertible that I drove until 82. And I don't know why, because I'm not particularly a brown person, but the 82 collector edition with that body, it just was so pretty. So I bought that in 82, got rid of 71, bought the 82. And that was the one that a picture was in the, I can't remember what year, the women's edition of Corvette. They have the ladies' edition of Vet magazine. And that one and I were in that edition. But it was August of 90, must have been August of 93, because I got the 94 not too much after that. It's probably August of, either August of 92 or August of 93. So I was in that edition. In my full-length mink coat that went with the car, and you know, anyway, so that was fun. 2 other girls in our Corvette club were in that same edition. We had a blast. And then I ordered the 94. First time I ever ordered one and had it made the way I want. Went back to the factory, and at the end of production, I got to turn the key on. I wanted so badly just to drive it off and go out to the test track. They wouldn't let me do it. You know, the gendarme was standing right in front of the car, you know, with a, you know, so, but it was fun. And then that was the car that stole my heart. And I think part of it was, that was when my dad was nearing the end of his life. My dad was really sick. And driving has always been my stress reliever. You know, I just drive. She never lost a race. What started the whole thing with drag racing, because I'd always been autocrossing, and the guys were going to the track, and I said, you know, I'm going to go. Signed up, and they go, well, girls don't race, and I said, why not? I pay dues just like anybody else. It irritated me. So I got 4 other gals in the Corvette Club together, and we formed Froofy Racing. Froofy is feminine and frilly. So we got these hot, a little bit darker than Barbie pink silk, you know, jackets, and and a feather boa to match the color of our cars. We had our helmets and we had our nicknames in the car, the whole thing, and we went whole hog. Well, Froofy was new that year. We all raced, and lo and behold, and we all drove Froofy because it was the new one. You know, we had all the way back to like a 74 up to Froofy 94. So we all drove Froofy. Guess who the first fastest 5 times were. Each of us. That car only beat herself. And so then the guys decided, well, we have to have a men's class and a women's class. Of course, because we took all their trophies home. And then Frufi never lost a race, never. So when they did that, I got one of the guys in the Corvette Club to drive Frufi in the men's stock.
So that's a 69, 71, 82, 94.
And then Frufi got totaled. Frufi and I almost got totaled with her. Sitting in a light one night in the rain. Gal was changing a CD, never saw me, never saw the light, never saw the car behind her in a 55-mile-an-hour zone. So Frufi went to the Corvette graveyard, and I bought a 96. And I had that car until June of 2016. And it was a coupe, because with the Frufi the fourth was a convertible. And I realized, had that been a bigger vehicle that hit us, it could have come up over the top of me and I had no protection. So I bought a coupe. The top comes off, the target comes off. So, but that 94 was my heart. And the 96 was great, but it did not own my heart. When the time came, and I knew if you live long enough, whatever your passion is, you get to the point where physically, with the arthritis in my hands, I can't hang on to a steering wheel hard enough to drive it the way it needs to be driven. I refuse to have a Corvette as a garage queen. It needs to be driven. And the last year I had it, I only put 400 miles on it, and I thought, nope, it's time. So I mentioned it to a friend of mine who said, how much? And I gave him a good deal, and he got on a plane and was there a couple of days later and drove it back home. So it's great that it went to somebody who will take care of it, because I would not have sold it to somebody who would not.
Drive it to the hangar occasionally.
Yes, drive it to the hangar occasionally. But yeah, and complain about every pothole on the way. But
Hey, what's up?
so those are my Corvettes. And 2 years later, last year, 2018, I finally thought because I have a Dodge Durango Citadel. It's all-wheel drive. I bought it and took 3 years around the country, driving everywhere that I've always wanted to go. We'd be flying along, and Paul would get on the intercom and go, down over there on the left is, but I never saw it like in person. So I made a list and did my bucket list, with the exception of I have not been to the Carlsbad Caverns yet. To drive from Tennessee to the Carlsbad Caverns, I'm in my 70s. I'm not doing that trip. No way. So I'll fly down in the winter when it's not real hot out there. But yeah, I love my Durango, but I still drive with the Corvette Club. So I would take off and they would be behind me. They couldn't catch me in the Durango. And we're doing the Tail of the Dragon and the Snake, and I'm out there playing road race in the Durango. And I finally decided I miss a fun car. And the Durango's great. I love it. It's my tow vehicle, but I needed something for me, and that was fun. And I've always wanted a yellow car. 1972, I ordered a yellow car from England. It didn't come, and it didn't come. Red would show up in the boat, and black cars would show up in the boat, or green. Then I found out I was pregnant. Well, you don't have a TR7 with a baby. So 45 years later, I got my yellow car.
Is it a Charger?
It's a Challenger.
Challenger.
I ordered it exactly the way I wanted it. So, and people are so shocked when this little gray-haired old lady gets out and gets in the Challenger and takes off. It's fun, though. I enjoy it. So I've back to cars, but just one that's easier to drive, easier on the body. So it's still, and it's just about the only car, American car these days, that goes back to my youth and really looks a lot like it did when it came out in 1970. It has that same, I don't know what I leased it for 3 years. I don't know what I'm going to get in 21. We'll have to see what's out there. My son finally talked me into leasing a car every 3 years. That way it's always under warranty. So, but I've had a wonderful life. As a female, the blessing of having been born in the United States to parents who were good people that taught us how to be good people, gave us every opportunity, taught us to work, taught us a work ethic, showed us a work ethic. There are just so many advantages. I've had a good life overall when you compare it to many other people's lives. It took a while after my husband died. When somebody is critically ill like that, and basically you have to watch 24/7, you lose yourself in that. And it took a while for me to find out, who am I today? Other than a woman pushing 70, who am I today? So I came and visited all my cousins, every single one of them that I'd wanted to do for a while and hadn't been able to. And by the time I got home, I'd decided what I wanted to do and what I wanted to contribute to this world. And that's what I've been doing the last 6.5 years. So enjoy it.